Well, it's looking like Democrats are having a major problem brewing in the state of Texas, which, for those that don't know, the state of Texas is a must win for Democrats if they want to somehow, some way retake the Senate after 2026. If they lose the Texas Senate race, there's basically no pathway to getting a majority whatsoever. It's already tough enough with the current map. But if you lose Texas, even if you win North Carolina, Maine, and Ohio, that is not enough. You're still at 50-50 in the Senate. That's why the state of Texas, it's basically a must-win state for Democrats if they want a real majority. Because, okay, they win three other states. Guess what? That's not enough. You have to win Texas if you want 51 in the Senate. And it's looking like those slim chances at winning Texas, it may be going down the toilet already. Just look at this headline right here. And this was from a couple days ago, but it's basically been confirmed that, yeah, this is actually real. Jasmine Crockett has no idea if she'll actively support Talarico's campaign. Yeah, Jasmine Crockett, the same congresswoman that just a couple months ago got 46% of the vote in the Democrat primary, which is over 1 million votes, by the way. We're not talking about somebody that didn't crack 5%. She took second place and nearly won. I don't think I have to explain to you why this is not good for Talarico. I get it, Crockett could be a liability on some fronts. I get that. But the more you look at the current state of the race and really the state of Texas as a whole, you begin to realize, yeah, no, this is horrific for Talarico. No matter how you try to spin it, this is DEFCON 1. And Democrats know it. In fact, this same article from the Dallas Morning News, look what it says right here. Crockett said she had received what she classified as an afterthought invite earlier this month. And she's talking about an invitation to the Texas Democrat Party convention. And this is what she said. I had missed a call that I've not returned, nor have I listened to the message from Talarico. Crockett told the news. It seemed like an afterthought invite. I can't say for sure, but I haven't listened to it. Party officials later somewhat disputed that characterization, saying she's been invited since March. So, yeah, as you can tell, this is not just some minor difference, not a minor dispute. It's clear Crockett has some major issues and beef with the Texas Democrat Party, and she's actively ignoring calls for the Talarico campaign, from Talarico himself, ignoring calls for the Democrat Party. Does this sound like a united front? Does this sound like the entire Democrat base is 100% behind Talarico and they're ready to campaign for him? No. This is awful for Talarico. You need everything to go your way to win Texas, even with Ken Paxton being the Republican nominee. You don't want this type of drama in June. We are only 5 months out from Election Day, and they're still dealing with this nonsensical drama, which is not a good thing. Again, this is not just a Democrat state. This is not even a real swing state. This is Texas. You need everything to go your way to win. Yet they are nearly in July, and they still don't have Jasmine Crockett getting behind Talarico 100%. She may not even go to the convention. That is awful. Now, I know some people are going to argue that, well, if you're going to make a big deal about the Democrat primary, you got to talk about the Republican one because, yeah, that is a good point to a certain extent where John Cornyn in the first round especially, he did get 42% of the vote. He got 42% of the vote in the runoff. He did get killed, but he still got 36%. So you can make the argument that, well, if Talarico's having this problem, so is Paxton. Because Ken Paxton, he may have some issues trying to get John Cornyn voters on his side. Because John Cornyn right now, he's not being a team player. He's throwing a temper tantrum, which is a surprise to nobody. Seriously, nobody is surprised by this. But even then, you really can't compare the two. Because John Cornyn, he is the incumbent. That alone makes this a completely different set of circumstances. Plus, he's been here for what, 30 years? When you include his positions before the Senate, he's been in statewide politics in Texas for like 30 years now. So he already had, no matter what happens, this advantage where he has a floor. He has name recognition. He's going to get like 30+% no matter what. And I guarantee you a good chunk of these Cornyn voters, they're going to just vote for Paxton anyways. They're going to vote for him no matter what, because a lot of them, they just voted for Cornyn because they know who he is. They know he's the incumbent. He has that incumbency advantage. You really can't compare the Democrat primary to this, because the Democrat primary, you did not have an incumbent here. You had Talarico, a state legislator, and Jasmine Crockett, a congresswoman. You just cannot compare the two for that reason alone. One is an incumbent, the other doesn't. Simple as that. But on top of that, Texas is a Republican state. This is not even a swing state. I know Democrats, they keep pushing the idea that this year it's going to finally flip. Maybe in a best case scenario, maybe Talarico can pull it off. Even then, that's not a sign of a true swing state. It is still a very Republican state. It voted for Trump by what? 15 points? Yeah, excuse me, 13 and a half. Even back in 2020, Trump won it by over 5. It is a Republican state. So this competitive primary for Republicans, they get a bit more leeway because guess what? It's Texas. It's not Arizona or Georgia. It's not Pennsylvania. It's none of these states. It is way more Republican. And I would be saying the same thing if this was Colorado, but for Democrats. If Democrats had a brutal down the wire primary in Colorado, for example, and it got really bad, yes, it probably hurts Democrats in that scenario. That is true. But they have a bit more leeway. They have a bit more room to deal with that. Because guess what? Colorado is way more Democrat than, say, Arizona. Texas is way more Republican than Arizona or Georgia. You get the point. If this was like Georgia, yes, it would hurt Republicans. But here, it hurts Democrats more. When you think about it, this contested primary, it hurts them even more because this is a Republican state. They need full unity to win, and they're not getting that. And Jasmine Crockett actually brings up a good point. I know, that's shocking to say, but she brought up a good point that Democrats right now, she doesn't think they're united behind Talarico. And I think they mostly are, but they're struggling, according to her, with one group, Black voters. And this right here is why Democrats, I think, are so worried about getting Crockett on board. Because you may notice something about the results in the first round. Jasmine Crockett did the best in the eastern half of the state. Well, most people probably know this part of Texas is way more Black on average. And Black voters, they're Democrat voters. They're going to vote in Democrat primaries. They voted for Crockett by a large margin. You think I'm exaggerating? Look at this. Not a perfect map. It's a little bit outdated. I get that. But look at this. The eastern part of the state is significantly more Black than the rest of the state. And that's where Crockett did the best in. She did the best in the Houston area, Dallas, rural eastern Texas, because that's where Black voters are in Texas. Yes, there's something like Austin, but really, they make up like 5% of the vote in these areas, if that. Eastern part of the state, meanwhile, they make up a larger share. That's the real reason that this is a big problem for Dems. And we were talking about this even before this article from the Dallas News or whatever, where Democrats, they need these Black voters to vote for them. If they don't, it doesn't matter what happens with Hispanics. It doesn't really matter what happens with white voters. If Black voters don't vote, Talarico has no pathway. That's why they're desperate to get Crockett on board. They know these voters, a lot of them, they're not going to vote. They're not enthusiastic because there's not a major black Democrat running in any of these major races. None. And that was always a concern for Dems where, hey, we have James Talarico, but who might do better with Hispanics, but at the same time falls apart with black voters. Does that mean Republicans are going to win these voters? Oh, of course not. They're not going to. But all that matters is these people, they're not going to vote. And that's the major issue with this. That's the big difference. Republicans in Texas, they don't really have this problem. Yes, there's some college-educated whites, but even then, in the runoff, Ken Paxton did just fine in Denton, in Collin, Dallas, Tarrant. The only place he lost was Travis County, and barely. Yes, he's a little bit weaker with some of these college-educated whites, but it's not as bad as, well, this. That's the issue that Democrats have in Texas. That's why this is a big deal, that Crockett's not fully behind Talarico. If she's not behind him, he's going to struggle big time to get these people out to vote. That's not good for Talarico. Again, how can you spin this as a good thing for Talarico? You need black voters to vote for you in large numbers to win, especially in Texas as a Democrat. You don't get those voters, you're fucked. And that's the first thing you need to do as a Democrat in Texas. You have to run up with black voters. You need maxed out turnout, get as many of them out to vote as possible, and you have a chance. You don't get that, barring a miracle by winning white voters just with a majority of the vote, there's no way you're going to win Texas. I'm sorry, you got to win black voters by a large margin, and they got to vote in large numbers. That is the first thing. And that's the part that nobody talks about. Everyone in Texas talks about the Hispanic vote. And that's important, of course. But guess what? Black voters are far more Democrat than Hispanics. And yeah, he might gain with Hispanics and some white voters. But if these black voters are not voting in large numbers, you're kind of screwed. When you think about it, you're kind of just screwed. These are 90-10 voters just not showing up to vote. That is not good. So for a Democrat to win Texas, they need black voters to vote in large numbers. And I don't think they're getting that with Talarico. That's why suddenly now they're begging for Crockett to go to the convention and try to rally up her base. They know they've kind of screwed themselves over here. They need somebody like Jasmine Crockett to juice up the base. So that's the first issue. That is the first thing you need. And right now, they're not getting that. It's clear. Even Crockett herself is acknowledging that. That's the first thing. You need black voters to vote for you. Secondly, of course, Hispanics. You have to win Hispanics by dictator margins. You don't do this, you're done. You just don't got enough votes. Back in 2018, Beto ran it up in El Paso. He ran it up in the southern part of the state. It was everywhere. Now, you could argue there were some signs of what we saw in 2020 and 24 happening here, but still, he won the Hispanic vote by a landslide. In fact, the Fox voter analysis, he won them by over like 40 points, which is obviously a landslide margin. Like, no doubt about it. You win them by over 40 points. Yeah, you're doing pretty good with them. That is why Beto, he came so close to winning. But here's the issue. Even Beto had one tiny issue. This is the problem the Democrats are still facing today. Even if you get maxed out black turnout, and of course, they vote for you, you do phenomenal with Hispanics, which you could argue, even though Hispanics might revert a little bit, do you really think Hispanics are going back to 2018 margins in like Stark County, plus 50 for Dems, Cameron plus 26? Do you think it's going to happen? If anything, it's going to be closer to 2020, where, yeah, Democrats are winning these areas, but not by 40 points. They're winning them by like 15, which is still good, but not enough. But really, another big issue, it's simply white voters. In Texas, every year, Republicans, the reason they win Texas by as much as they do It's because the white vote. And that's a big reason why Cruz won. You can argue he did underperform with some voters, some white voters. That's true. He still won the white vote by over 30 points. And according to Fox, they make up over 60% of the vote in Texas. That is why Cruz won. If he did not win them by a dictator margin, we probably have Senator Beto right now. And that is always a huge issue. Yeah, you run up with black voters and Hispanics. Guess what? The white vote is still going to be safer. It is still R plus 25, R plus 30, R plus 40. It is crazy what happens. But that's why Republicans win Texas every year. Will Talarico do better with some white college educated voters? Yeah. Like in Austin, San Antonio, Dallas. I get that. Like Dallas and other areas. Fine. I could see that happening. But do you really think Talarico is going to do 20 points better in some of these rural counties? Do you really think that's what's going to happen here? No. Talarico might do like 10 points better in Travis. Fine. And 10 points better in Dallas. Fine. We'll give you that in Tarrant. Is that enough to win? No. You see the problem here? Already Talarico, he's on shaky grounds with all three of these things you need. You need maxed out black turnout. Right now, you're not getting that based on what Democrats are saying. They're admitting that they might be in deep shit. You need to run up with Hispanics, which, yeah, there'd be some reversion, but is it back to 2018 levels? I don't think so. I think it's closer to 2020, which is not enough. And finally, white voters. You cannot get killed with white voters. If you do, it doesn't matter what happens with Hispanics or black voters, you're screwed. Those are the major issues that Democrats need to figure out. And so far, Talarico, he's getting maybe one in improvement with some white voters in like Dallas and Austin. Outside of that, black turnout's gonna be a big problem. They're now admitting this. And Hispanic reversion, I don't think it's the level they need it to be. Maybe it's closer to 2020, which is still not enough. Maybe it's a bit more Democrat, but they still need it to be like 2018 levels to win. Anyways, folks, thank you so much for watching. If you guys did enjoy, smash the like button down below, subscribe, share with your friends, and of course, join the channel today. Godspeed to all of you.